My name is James Wilson, and I'm a 36-year-old software architect living in Portland, Oregon. I've spent the last decade building my career at Nexus Technologies, a growing tech firm in downtown Portland, where I've worked my way up from a junior developer to leading our architecture team. We specialize in enterprise solutions, and I've always prided myself on my problem-solving abilities, both in code and in life. Little did I know that those skills would be put to the ultimate test in my personal life. I met Sarah during our junior year at Oregon State University. She was studying marketing and communications while I was buried in computer science coursework. We met at a mutual friend's party. She spilled her drink on my laptop, and instead of being angry, I found myself captivated by her apologetic smile and quick wit. That chance encounter led to coffee the next day, dinner the following weekend. And before we knew it, we were inseparable throughout college and beyond. Sarah was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: intelligent, ambitious, and charming. She had this infectious laugh that could light up any room, with long auburn hair that she'd often tie up when she was concentrating on something important. We shared a love for hiking the Pacific Northwest trails, trying new restaurants, and quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. After dating for 3 years, I proposed during a sunset hike at Cannon Beach, one of our favorite spots along the Oregon coast, that we married in a relatively small ceremony with close friends and family present. Sarah looked breathtaking in her simple white dress, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found someone who balanced me so perfectly. She was outgoing where I was reserved, spontaneous where I was methodical. We complemented each other well, or so I believed. After marriage, we rented an apartment downtown for a few years while building our careers. Sarah quickly climbed the corporate ladder at Meridian Marketing, one of Portland's most prestigious advertising agencies. She started as a marketing coordinator but impressed everyone with her creative campaigns and people skills. 4 years into our marriage, we had saved enough for a down payment on a beautiful craftsman-style home in the Selwood neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, with a backyard perfect for the family we planned to start soon. Our home became our sanctuary and pride. I converted one of the bedrooms into a home office where I'd occasionally work remotely, while Sarah decorated the rest of the house with tasteful mid-century furniture and locally sourced art. We hosted dinner parties for colleagues and friends, joined a neighborhood association, and built what appeared to be a perfect life together. We even had names picked out for our future children: Emma for a girl, Nathan for a boy. Our friends often commented on how well we worked as a team. Sarah handled the social calendar and home decor, while I managed our finances and home maintenance. We had separate interests. She had her book club and yoga classes. I had my weekend basketball league and tech meetups. But we always made time for each other. Date nights were sacred, and we never went to bed angry, following advice from Sarah's parents, who had been married for 40 years. In retrospect, perhaps things weren't as perfect as I perceived them to be. But when you're living day to day with someone, subtle changes can go unnoticed until they accumulate into something impossible to ignore. For 7 years, our marriage seemed stable and loving. We had our occasional disagreements, but nothing out of the ordinary. I trusted Sarah completely, and I thought she felt the same way about me. Little did I know that our carefully constructed life was about to crumble beneath a foundation of secrets and betrayal. The first hints that something was amiss began around our 7th anniversary. We had just returned from a week-long vacation in Hawaii, a trip we had been planning for months. Sarah seemed distracted throughout the trip, constantly checking her phone and attributing it to putting out fires at work. I didn't think much of it at the time. Her agency had recently landed a major client, and I understood the pressures of job responsibilities. After returning home, however, Sarah's behavior continued to change in subtle ways. What started as occasional late nights at the office became a near-regular occurrence. Big project deadline, she would text, or client emergency meeting. I'd find myself eating dinner alone 3 or 4 nights a week, something that had never happened before in our marriage. Her phone became an extension of her hand and a fortress of privacy. She changed her passcode, something we had never done before. We had always known each other's phone passwords, not out of suspicion but convenience. When messages arrived, she would angle the screen away from me or quickly exit the room to respond. Once, when I casually picked up her phone to check the weather while mine was charging, she nearly lunged across the kitchen to take it back. claiming she had confidential client information that couldn't be seen by anyone else. Our conversations began to feel different too. Sarah would give vague responses about her day, changing subjects when I asked about specific meetings or colleagues. When I'd mentioned something about our future plans, the family we had talked about starting soon, she would become evasive, saying things like, "Let's revisit that conversation next year when this big project is done." Our physical intimacy started to wane as well. Sarah would come home exhausted, immediately shower, and fall asleep before I even came to bed. When I would initiate affection, she would often claim she was too tired or had an early morning meeting. What had once been a passionate physical relationship dwindled to occasional, almost perfunctory encounters that left me feeling more disconnected than satisfied. Then came the weekend team-building events that mysteriously appeared on her calendar. Throughout our relationship, Sarah had always complained about corporate team-building exercises, calling them forced fun that she dreaded. Yet suddenly, she was volunteering for weekend workshops and overnight retreats that she claimed were crucial for her professional development. When I asked if I could join her for dinner afterward or pick her up, there was always some reason why that wouldn't work. Point one Saturday evening, concerned that she was working too hard, I thought I'd surprise her with dinner at her office. I picked up food from her favorite Thai restaurant and drove downtown. The agency building was dark and locked, no weekend team building happening there. When Sarah came home later that night, she mentioned how productive the workshop had been. When I asked where it was held, she vaguely mentioned a conference center by the airport before quickly changing the subject. Our bank statements showed unusual charges too, restaurant bills from places we hadn't visited together, a hotel parking garage downtown on a night she claimed to be at a client dinner, small but unexplained cash withdrawals. When I asked about them casually, she attributed everything to work expenses that would be reimbursed, though I never saw the reimbursements hit our account. Most concerning was Sarah's emotional distance. She became irritable over minor issues, clothes left on the floor, dishes in the sink, things that had never bothered her before. When I tried to discuss these changes in her behavior, she would turn the conversation around, suggesting I was being controlling or paranoid. She accused me of not understanding the pressures of her job, despite the fact that I had always been supportive of her career. One night, after she canceled our anniversary dinner claiming a client emergency, I found myself staring at a photo of us from our wedding day. The smiling, present woman in that photo seemed like a different person from the distracted, defensive stranger who now shared my home. Something had changed, and deep in my gut, I feared the worst. But suspicion isn't proof, and I had always believed in giving people, especially those you love, the benefit of the doubt. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was keeping something significant from me. The woman who once shared everything with me, from minor workplace dramas to her deepest fears and dreams, was now a vault of secrets. Each day brought new inconsistencies in her stories, new excuses for her absence, new reasons to avoid meaningful connection that I found myself lying awake at night while she slept, wondering what had happened to us, wondering if I had done something wrong or if this was just a phase in our marriage that we needed to work through. I considered suggesting couples therapy, but something held me back. Perhaps the fear that bringing our problems into the open would make them real in a way I wasn't prepared to face. For 3 long months, I lived with this growing unease, making excuses for Sarah's behavior both to myself and to friends who noticed her increasing absences from our social gatherings. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation for everything, that my worst fears were just insecurities manifesting in unhealthy ways. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, often when you least expect it. The night I discovered the truth about Sarah's deception began like many others in recent months. I had worked late, coming home to an empty house with a text from Sarah saying she was at a client dinner and would be home late. Not wanting to eat alone again, I called my friend Eric and met him for burgers at our local pub. When I returned home around 10 p.m., Sarah still wasn't back. That I settled into my home office to catch up on some work emails, eventually hearing Sarah's key in the door around midnight. She came upstairs, kissed me quickly on the cheek, and mentioned how exhausted she was from the intense client negotiations. She smelled faintly of wine and an unfamiliar cologne. Before I could ask any questions, she disappeared into the bathroom for an unusually long shower. When she emerged, She sat on the edge of the bed with her laptop, claiming she needed to send a few follow-up emails before sleeping. I watched as she typed intently, her face illuminated by the screen in our darkened bedroom. Eventually, her typing slowed, her head nodded, and she fell asleep with the laptop still open beside her. I was about to close the laptop and put it away when a notification silently appeared in the corner of her screen. It was from a messaging app one didn't recognize, showing a preview from someone named Michael. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last week was amazing. My hand froze above the keyboard. I had never been the type to invade Sarah's privacy, but after months of suspicion and growing distance, this message felt like confirmation of my worst fears. With a sick feeling in my stomach, I clicked on the notification. The messaging app opened to reveal months of conversations between Sarah and this Michael person. As I scrolled upward through their chat history, the full extent of their relationship became horrifyingly clear. There were intimate messages detailing their physical encounters, complaints about their respective marriages, and plans for future meetings. They exchanged photos I couldn't bring myself to open fully. They had inside jokes about deceiving me and his wife. They had even discussed potential futures together. With trembling hands, I took screenshots of several incriminating conversations, emailing them to myself before closing the app. I then discovered that Michael was actually Michael Donovan, Sarah's boss and the creative director at Meridian Marketing. A married man with 2 young daughters, he had been to our home for dinner parties on several occasions, bringing his wife Amy along. I remembered how he had complimented Sarah's work ethic and how fortunate he felt to have her on his team. The memory now made me physically ill. Further investigation of her email revealed hotel receipts for downtown establishments on nights she claimed to be working late. Her location history showed regular visits to an address in the West Hills, presumably Michael's home. On afternoons, she told me she was at yoga or meeting friends. Credit card statements showed purchases at lingerie stores and restaurants across town where she'd never mentioned dining. The affair had been going on for nearly 5 months, starting shortly after Michael promoted her to senior marketing manager, reporting directly to him. They had apparently grown close while working on the new major client campaign, with late nights at the office eventually leading to drinks, confessions of understanding each other like no one else could, and ultimately, betrayal. What struck me most as I pieced together their timeline was the calculated nature of their deception. Sarah had created elaborate covers for their meetings, sometimes involving innocent colleagues as unwitting alibis. She'd taken business trips that were actually romantic getaways. She'd lied to my face countless times, coming home from being with him to sleep beside me as if nothing was wrong. Even more painful were the messages where they discussed me. Sarah complained about my boring routine and how I didn't understand her creative spirit. Michael responded with sympathy about being trapped in marriages that no longer fulfilled them. They mocked my trusting nature, with Sarah once writing, "James actually believed I was at a team-building workshop all weekend," followed by a laughing emoji that pierced my heart more than any physical blow could have. That I sat in the dim light of our bedroom for hours, watching Sarah sleep peacefully beside the very evidence of her betrayal. The woman I had built my life around, the person I trusted most in the world, had been systematically lying to me while building a relationship with another man. Every late night, every weekend absence, every irritable outburst suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. By dawn, I had gone through stages of shock, nausea, rage, and finally, a cold, clear determination. I couldn't confront her immediately. Emotions were too raw, and I needed time to think. What I didn't know was that I couldn't continue living in this lie of a marriage. Sarah had made her choice repeatedly, day after day, for months. Now it was time for me to make mine. I quietly slipped out of bed, took a shower, and left for work earlier than usual, leaving Sarah still asleep. She texted me later that morning with casual domestic questions about dinner plans, completely unaware that her secret world had been exposed. I responded normally, buying myself time to process and plan. That day at work was a blur. I sat in meetings, nodding at appropriate intervals while my mind raced through the implications of what I had discovered. By lunchtime, I had made an appointment with a divorce attorney for the following day. By afternoon, I had opened an individual bank account and transferred a portion of my latest paycheck into it. Not everything just enough to ensure I had independent resources if needed, that I wasn't going to be impulsive or destructive. I wouldn't key her car or throw her belongings onto the front lawn like in some television drama. The pain and humiliation I felt deserved a more measured, consequential response. Sarah and Michael had constructed an elaborate fantasy at the expense of their families. They had violated trust, promises, and professional boundaries. What they didn't realize was that fantasies eventually collide with reality. And I was about to become that reality. The morning after discovering Sarah's affair, I met with Patricia Ramirez, a highly recommended divorce attorney known for her methodical approach. I brought copies of the screenshots and other evidence I had collected. Patricia's office was a calm, organized space that matched her personality, perfect for helping me channel my emotional turmoil into strategic thinking. Unfortunately, situations like yours are common, Patricia said after reviewing my evidence. But you haven't. Advantage many don't. You haven't confronted your wife yet. This gives us time to prepare properly. She explained that Oregon, while not technically a fault state for divorce, does consider marital misconduct when determining property division and spousal support, especially when the misconduct involves financial impropriety or when it occurs with a workplace superior potentially creating career advantages through an inappropriate relationship. Document everything, Patricia advised. Continue gathering evidence, but be careful not to access anything that would require breaking passwords or violating privacy laws. Everything needs to be obtained legally if it's going to help you in court. Together, we established a comprehensive plan. First, I needed to protect myself financially without taking actions that could be viewed as vindictive or retaliatory. Patricia suggested I gather all our financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, retirement funds, property deeds, and insurance policies. She advised keeping copies of these documents in a secure location outside our home, that I took a day off work while Sarah was at the office to thoroughly photograph and document all valuable items in our home, creating an inventory with approximate values. I located and copied our tax returns for the past 7 years, our marriage certificate, property agreements, and the prenuptial agreement we had signed before our wedding, a document that included an infidelity clause that Sarah had actually insisted upon. Following Patricia's advice, I transferred 50% of our joint savings into a new individual account, a perfectly legal move that would protect those assets while still leaving Sarah access to her fair share. I updated the beneficiaries on my life insurance policy and 401k from Sarah to my parents temporarily, another legal step that would be reversed if reconciliation occurred. That I installed security cameras in legal areas of our home, the exterior, entrances, driveway, and public spaces like the living room and kitchen. Oregon being a one-party consent state for recordings, I also kept a voice recorder app ready on my phone for any confrontational conversations that might occur once everything was in the open. Patricia helped me understand that divorce proceedings would likely take 6 to 12 months, and maintaining stability during that time would be crucial. I secured copies of both our credit reports and placed fraud alerts on my accounts to prevent any new credit lines being opened in my name. I began documenting Sarah's pattern of absences and the timeline of her affair, correlating her text messages with the evidence I had found. But the legal preparation was just one aspect of my response. There was also the personal side, the profound betrayal not just by my wife, but by someone who had sat at our dinner table with his own family. Michael Donovan had looked me in the eye while carrying on with my wife. Both had violated not just marital vows but professional ethics, company policies, and basic human decency. That I had always considered myself a rational person who didn't seek revenge, but I did believe in accountability. Sarah and Michael had created this situation through hundreds of individual choices, each one an opportunity to stop their deception that they had instead embraced. Now they would face the natural consequences of those choices. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued my normal routine on the surface while meticulously preparing underneath. I joined Sarah for dinner when she was home, listened to her stories about work challenges, and pretended not to notice when she slipped away to text Michael. I even attended a neighborhood barbecue with her where she played the role of loving wife perfectly. The performance was both impressive and sickening. During this time, I researched Meridian Marketing's company policies regarding workplace relationships. As I suspected, relationships between managers and direct reports were explicitly prohibited due to the power imbalance and potential conflicts of interest. The company had a clear reporting structure for such violations, with protections for anonymous reports. That I also learned more about Michael Donovan through social media and mutual connections. He had been with the company for 12 years, rising to creative director 5 years ago. His wife Amy was a pediatric nurse who worked part-time to care for their daughters, ages 8 and 10. They had recently renovated their West Hills home and taken a family vacation to Italy, all while Michael was carrying on with Sarah behind everyone's back. As my legal preparation neared completion, I faced the question of how to handle the human element of this situation. My parents had raised me to believe that character is defined by how you act when wronged, not by sinking to the level of those who hurt you, but by maintaining your dignity while ensuring justice. Revenge wasn't my goal, but neither was playing the passive victim. After careful consideration, I decided that Amy Donovan deserved to know the truth about her husband, just as I had needed to know about Sarah. The company where professional boundaries had been violated deserved to know about the abuse of power occurring within their management ranks. And our social circle, who had been unwittingly enlisted in covering for their affair through fabricated stories, deserved authenticity. 3 weeks after my discovery, with all preparations in place, I was ready to set consequences in motion, not out of vengeance, but because actions should have outcomes. Sarah and Michael had orchestrated an elaborate deception that hurt multiple people. They had abused trust, violated professional ethics, and manipulated those around them. They had acted as though they were entitled to their fantasy without repercussions. Reality was about to assert itself. My approach to the social consequences of Sarah and Michael's affair was calculated and deliberate. I wanted truth exposed in a factual manner rather than an emotional outburst that could be dismissed as jealousy or bitterness. The facts themselves were damning enough without any embellishment from me. My first step was reaching out to Michael's wife, Amy. This wasn't about revenge, but rather ensuring she had the same opportunity to make informed decisions about her life that I now had. I found her professional email through the hospital where she worked and sent a brief message asking to meet regarding an urgent personal matter. I didn't want to blindside her with details via email, but needed to establish contact. Amy responded within hours, understandably concerned about my vague message. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe far from both our neighborhoods and her workplace. When she arrived, I recognized her immediately from company functions. Petite with blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, still wearing scrubs from her hospital shift. The worry on her face made what I was about to do even more difficult. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, I began after she sat down. But I recently discovered something that affects both our families, and I believe you deserve to know. I handed her a folder containing selected screenshots and evidence, organized chronologically. I had carefully excluded the most intimate details while including enough to leave no doubt about the nature of the relationship. As she reviewed the documents, her hands began to tremble. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks, I replied. I've been processing it and preparing legally before taking any action. Amy's professional composure, likely developed through years of delivering difficult news to parents of sick children, quickly gave way to anger, then deep sadness. She revealed that she had suspected something was wrong for months, but Michael had consistently gaslit her, making her feel paranoid for questioning his late nights and weekend absences. "They used our children as part of their cover," she said, showing me texts where Michael had claimed to be taking their daughters to activities when he was actually meeting Sarah. "That's unforgivable." We spent nearly 3 hours talking, comparing timelines, and filling in gaps in each other's understanding of the affair. We agreed to coordinate certain aspects of our responses, not out of malice, but to ensure neither Sarah nor Michael could continue manipulating and deceiving those around them. Amy decided she would confront Michael that evening after her parents came to take the girls for a previously planned weekend visit. She didn't want her daughters present for what would inevitably be a difficult conversation. I respected her approach and her primary concern for her children's emotional well-being. My next step was contacting Meridian Marketing's HR department. I compiled a professional report outlining the inappropriate relationship between a creative director and his direct report, including evidence of them misusing company time and resources for their affair. I didn't identify myself as Sarah's husband, simply as a concerned party with documented evidence of policy violations. The material I provided focused solely on professional misconduct rather than personal betrayal. I sent the report via registered mail to ensure it couldn't be ignored. Within 3 days, I received confirmation that the matter was being investigated with appropriate seriousness given the evidence provided. The HR representative also assured me that the company had strict non-retaliation policies to protect employees who might be affected by the fallout. Throughout this process, I maintained my normal routine, still not confronting Sarah directly. The weight of carrying this knowledge while watching her continue her deception was tremendous, but I knew that proper timing was crucial. I wanted all elements in place before having that final conversation with her. A week after my meeting with Amy, both Sarah and Michael were called into separate meetings with Meridian's HR department and senior leadership. Sarah came home that evening visibly shaken, claiming there were ridiculous allegations being made about her and Michael at work. She didn't volunteer any details about the nature of these allegations, and I didn't ask, simply nodding sympathetically as she ranted about jealous co-workers trying to damage her reputation. The following day, Sarah called from work in a panic. Both she and Michael had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Company policy prohibited them from discussing the matter with each other or any colleagues. Sarah was furious and frightened, asking me repeatedly if I thought she should hire an attorney. I suggested she might want to consult with one, keeping my tone measured and supportive. The company investigation moved quickly. Their internal review of email servers, badge access records, and expense reports corroborated the evidence I had provided. Several colleagues came forward with their own observations once the investigation began, describing inappropriate behavior they had witnessed but felt uncomfortable reporting previously given Michael's position of power. Within 2 weeks, both Sarah and Michael were terminated for violations of company policy. The official reason given was inappropriate workplace relationship between manager and subordinate, misuse of company resources, and creating a negative work environment, all documented with substantial evidence that would make any wrongful termination suit virtually impossible. The professional consequences they faced weren't engineered by me. They were the natural result of their own actions violating clearly established workplace policies. All I had done was ensure that the relevant information reached those who had authority to act upon it. The night after Sarah's termination, I finally decided it was time for our conversation. She came home devastated, still unaware that I knew anything about her affair. She spoke about hiring an employment attorney to fight the termination, claiming the company had no concrete evidence and was acting on malicious rumors. I listened quietly until she finished, then calmly said, "Sarah, I know about you and Michael. I've known for weeks." The color drained from her face as I methodically outlined what I had discovered and the steps I had taken. I showed her some of the evidence, including hotel receipts and location data that contradicted her stories about working late. I explained that I hadn't acted out of revenge, but out of a belief that both Amy and I deserved the truth and that their workplace had a right to enforce its policies. Sarah's reaction cycled rapidly through denial, anger, and finally desperate pleading. "It wasn't what you think," she insisted at first. "Then it was just a mistake, a stupid mistake that got out of hand." When those approaches failed to move me, she tried, "I still love you, James. We can fix this. We can go to counseling." I remained calm throughout her emotional storm. "This wasn't a one-time mistake, Sarah. It was hundreds of deliberate choices over months. You lied to my face daily. You discussed me with him, mocked me, complained about our marriage while presenting a different face to me. The trust is gone. What do you want from me?" she finally asked, tears streaming down her face. "I want a divorce," I replied simply. "I've already consulted an attorney. Given the circumstances and our prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause, I expect this to be straightforward." The mention of our prenup visibly shook her. Sarah had been the one who insisted on including strong infidelity provisions, ironically claiming that cheating is the one thing I could never forgive. Now those same provisions would significantly limit what she could claim from our shared assets. As reality set in, Sarah's demeanor changed. She became calculating, suggesting that I had orchestrated her professional downfall and threatening to tell our friends I had overreacted to a minor indiscretion. She didn't realize that several of our closest friends already knew the basics of the situation, not through any vindictive campaign on my part, but because Amy had naturally sought support from her friend's circle, which overlapped with ours. Our confrontation ended with Sarah leaving to stay with her sister, claiming she needed space to think. In reality, she was beginning to understand the comprehensive nature of the consequences she faced: unemployment, public embarrassment, destroyed professional reputation, and now divorce proceedings where her documented infidelity would significantly impact the outcome. Throughout the social fallout that followed, I maintained my dignity. I didn't engage in character assassination or public shaming. When asked by mutual friends, I stated simply that Sarah had been having an affair with her boss, that I had discovered it, and that our marriage was over as a result. I let the facts speak for themselves without embellishment. Some friends inevitably took sides, but most expressed support for me while maintaining appropriate distances from both Sarah and Michael. Their former colleagues at Meridian were less forgiving, many feeling that the pair's actions had created a toxic environment and embarrassment for the company. Several senior clients had questioned the agency's leadership and ethics after learning why a creative director and senior marketing manager had suddenly disappeared. Michael's social standing suffered particularly harsh consequences. As a father of young children in private school, his family had been integrated into that close-knit community. Once the reason for his marital separation became known, many parents became uncomfortable with him attending school functions or children's birthday parties. His daughter's classmates' parents were predominantly friends with Amy, creating awkward dynamics when he attempted to maintain normal involvement in his children's lives. Sarah found herself similarly isolated, having built most of our social connections around our marriage and our professional networks. Her sister, initially supportive, became increasingly distant after learning the full extent of Sarah's deception. Her parents, who had always emphasized honesty and responsibility, were deeply disappointed and struggled to reconcile their daughter's actions with the values they thought they had instilled. Neither Sarah nor Michael had anticipated how quickly their carefully constructed secret world would collapse once exposed to reality. What they had treated as a private matter between consenting adults had ripple effects through their families, careers, and communities. The consequences they faced weren't administered by me. They stemmed directly from their own choices finally becoming visible to those affected by them. Throughout this difficult period, I focused on maintaining my professional responsibilities, supporting mutual friends caught in the middle, and preparing for the legal proceedings that would formalize the end of my marriage. I didn't seek to destroy Sarah socially. The truth had accomplished that without any additional effort on my part. The legal process began 6 days after my confrontation with Sarah. My attorney, Patricia Ramirez, filed divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences rather than infidelity, a strategic decision that would prevent the proceedings from becoming unnecessarily contentious while still allowing us to present evidence of the affair when relevant to financial matters. Sarah was served with papers at her sister's apartment. According to the process server, she appeared resigned rather than surprised. Within days, she had retained her own attorney, Martin Goldstein, known for representing high-earning professionals in contentious divorces. Her choice of representation suggested she planned to fight despite the overwhelming evidence against her position. Our first indication of Sarah's strategy came during the initial temporary orders hearing. Her attorney portrayed her as a victim of workplace sexual harassment by a superior, suggesting that the power dynamics between her and Michael created a situation she felt unable to escape. This narrative contradicted the extensive evidence showing Sarah's enthusiastic participation and often initiation of their meetings and intimate exchanges. Patricia dismantled this portrayal methodically, presenting selected messages showing Sarah pursuing Michael, planning their encounters, and expressing frustration when his family obligations limited their time together. The judge was visibly unimpressed with the harassment claim, particularly given Sarah's simultaneous filing of a wrongful termination suit against Meridian Marketing, a suit that notably avoided mentioning any harassment allegations. The temporary orders established that I would maintain residence in our home and continue paying the mortgage, while Sarah would receive modest temporary support given her current unemployment. The judge explicitly cited the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement as likely enforceable given the clear evidence, but reserved final determination for later proceedings as the divorce progressed. Sarah's financial position deteriorated rapidly. Her wrongful termination suit against Meridian was dismissed in preliminary hearings when the company presented overwhelming documentation of policy violations. Her professional reputation in Portland's relatively small marketing community made finding comparable employment difficult. Michael, facing similar challenges, had relocated to Seattle for a position with significantly less responsibility and compensation than his previous role. 3 months into the proceedings, Sarah's attorney requested a settlement conference, signaling a shift in strategy. During these negotiations, Patricia maintained a firm but fair approach based on the prenuptial agreement's provisions. Given Sarah's documented infidelity with concrete evidence that would stand up in court, the agreement limited her claim on our shared assets substantially. The settlement discussions centered around three major assets: our home, retirement accounts, and investments. Under the prenup's infidelity clause, I was entitled to retain the home and my retirement accounts intact, while our joint investments would be divided with a 70-30 split in my favor. Sarah's attorney argued for more equitable distribution despite the prenup, citing her contributions to our household and her current financial hardship. Patricia countered with evidence that much of Sarah's current hardship stemmed directly from her own actions, the affair with her superior that violated clear workplace policies and resulted in her termination. Moreover, financial records showed that Sarah had spent significant sums from our joint accounts on hotels, gifts, and meals with Michael over the 5-month affair, expenditures that could be considered dissipation of marital assets under Oregon law. After 2 days of negotiation, Sarah's attorney advised her to accept terms close to what our prenuptial agreement prescribed. The final settlement awarded me the house and my retirement accounts, while Sarah received her personal property, her vehicle, and approximately 25% of our investment portfolio. She would receive no alimony given the circumstances of our separation and the specific provisions of our prenup. The judge, reviewing our settlement agreement, noted that the terms were actually more generous to Sarah than what might have been awarded had we proceeded to trial given the documented infidelity and the strong prenuptial agreement. The court commended both parties for resolving matters without prolonged litigation. Throughout the legal process, I maintained a professional demeanor in all court appearances and negotiations. I didn't seek punitive measures beyond what our prenuptial agreement specified. My goal wasn't to financially ruin Sarah, but to ensure that our separation followed the terms we had both agreed to when entering the marriage, terms that she herself had advocated for. Sarah, for her part, eventually dropped the victim narrative and acknowledged her responsibility, at least privately. During our final meeting to sign papers, she admitted, "I made a series of terrible decisions that destroyed everything we built. I didn't think about consequences, for you, for Amy and her kids, or even for myself." The divorce was finalized 11 months after I discovered the affair, faster than many contested divorces, but still a significant period of emotional strain and uncertainty. The court's final judgment reflected the settlement terms we had negotiated, with provisions for the clean division of our remaining financial connections. One unexpected aspect of the legal resolution came through Michael's divorce proceedings, which paralleled ours. Amy's attorney deposed Sarah regarding the timeline and nature of the affair, creating testimony that proved crucial in Amy securing primary custody of their daughters and favorable financial terms. Michael's attempts to portray the affair as a minor indiscretion crumbled when confronted with Sarah's sworn statements about its duration and intensity. In a final ironic twist, Michael attempted to sue Meridian Marketing for defamation, claiming they had shared details of his termination with potential employers. The suit was quickly dismissed when Meridian demonstrated they had only confirmed his dates of employment when contacted for references, with any additional information about his departure coming from former colleagues acting in their personal capacity. Neither Sarah nor Michael had anticipated how thoroughly their actions would unravel their professional and personal lives. What had begun as secret meetings and thrilling messages had concluded with sworn depositions, financial disclosures, and judicial determinations. The legal system, with its emphasis on evidence and consequences, had proven particularly ill-suited. For maintaining the fantasy world they had constructed, I left the courthouse on the day our divorce became final. I felt no triumph or satisfaction, only relief that this chapter was closing and determination to rebuild my life with the integrity and honesty that had been absent from the end of my marriage. 2 years have passed since the day I signed those final divorce papers, and my life has transformed in ways I never anticipated during those dark months of discovery and legal proceedings that I decided to keep our house in Selwood despite the painful memories it initially held. Over time, I've reclaimed the space as my own, renovating the kitchen that Sarah had always complained about and converting her office into a home gym. What once felt like a museum of our failed marriage now feels distinctly mine. The neighbors, who quietly supported me through the divorce, have become closer friends, often joining me for weekend barbecues on the back deck I built last summer. Professionally, my focus during the tumultuous divorce period actually led to unexpected advancement. My ability to compartmentalize personal turmoil and maintain high performance at work caught the attention of senior leadership. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I was promoted to Chief Technology Officer, overseeing our entire development division. The increased responsibilities and compensation have been rewarding, but more valuable has been the sense of purpose the role provides. Building products that genuinely improve our clients' operations that my colleagues have remarked on changes in my leadership style. I'm more decisive, more willing to address conflicts directly, and paradoxically, more empathetic to team members facing personal challenges. Going through such a profound betrayal and its aftermath taught me the importance of both maintaining boundaries and showing compassion, lessons that translate surprisingly well to executive leadership that I've developed new friendships and deepened existing ones. The divorce revealed who my true friends were, those who didn't choose sides or spread gossip, but offered quiet support and occasional distraction when needed. Eric, who I'd met for burgers that fateful night, has become like a brother to me. He never once said, "I told you so," despite having expressed concerns about Sarah's behavior months before I was ready to see the truth. We now have a standing weekly basketball game followed by craft beers at a local brewery. Dating again was initially terrifying. The first few attempts, about 8 months after the divorce, were awkward disasters. I either shared too much about my past or avoided the topic entirely, creating an obvious void in conversation. Eventually, with some counseling and advice from friends who had navigated post-divorce relationships, I found a healthier approach, acknowledging the past without letting it dominate new connections. About a year ago, I met Melissa at a charity cycling event. She's a pediatric physical therapist with a warm laugh and direct communication style that I find refreshing after years of decoding Sarah's subtle cues and hidden agendas. We've been dating for 10 months now, taking things at a measured pace. Melissa knows my story, not every painful detail, but enough to understand my occasional moments of irrational insecurity. She has her own past hurts from a long-term relationship with an alcoholic partner, which gives her a unique empathy for trust issues without the baggage of comparing our situation to her marriage. I've maintained minimal contact with Sarah over these 2 years, interacting only through attorneys when necessary for final financial matters. According to mutual acquaintances, she struggled significantly after the divorce. The marketing industry in Portland essentially blacklisted her, not through any campaign on my part, but as a result of how the situation at Meridian unfolded. Her professional reputation, once sterling, was now permanently marked by the scandal. After 6 months of unemployment, Sarah eventually took a position with a small agency in Phoenix, Arizona, a complete restart professionally and personally. Her salary is reportedly half what she made at Meridian, and she works under supervision with limited client contact. The consequences of her actions followed her despite the geographic distance, as reference checks invariably uncovered the circumstances of her departure from Meridian. She's had to rebuild from entry-level despite her decade of experience. Michael Donovan's post-divorce trajectory has been equally challenging. His position in Seattle lasted only 4 months before the company downsized his department. According to Amy, with whom I've maintained occasional friendly contact, he subsequently moved to Chicago for a mid-level position at a digital marketing firm. His relationship with his daughters has become strained, limited to monthly visits and video calls that the girls increasingly try to avoid. His parents, who had been close with Amy, sided with her in the divorce, further isolating him from family support, the affair that Sarah and Michael believed would bring them excitement. And fulfillment instead cost them their marriages, careers, reputations, financial stability, and family connections. Whatever romantic notions they harbored about their relationship collapsed under the weight of its consequences. They haven't been in contact with each other since the dual terminations, each blaming the other for their predicament in conversations. With mutual acquaintances, Amy has fared better, focusing on her daughter's well-being and gradually rebuilding her life. She returned to nursing full-time, recently becoming a charge nurse in her pediatric unit. She sold the West Hills home and bought a comfortable townhouse closer to her parents. We occasionally exchange emails, sharing updates on our lives with the unique understanding that comes from parallel experiences. She recently mentioned dating a fellow healthcare professional, approaching the relationship with the same careful optimism I've found with Melissa.as for what I've learned through this experience. The lessons have been profound and sometimes unexpected. I've discovered that I'm more resilient than I ever imagined. The man who felt utterly destroyed that night staring at messages on Sarah's laptop has emerged stronger, more self-aware, and surprisingly, more compassionate. I've learned about the value of controlled response versus impulsive reaction. Had I confronted Sarah immediately, thrown her belongings onto the lawn, or launched a public campaign against her and Michael, the outcomes would have been dramatically different, and likely less favorable for everyone involved, including me. The disciplined approach I took, while emotionally taxing, ultimately served justice more effectively than any vengeful outburst could have. And I've also gained insight into the nature of betrayal and accountability. Sarah and Michael weren't punished by me. They experienced the natural consequences of their own choices. The company didn't terminate them because I wanted revenge. They terminated them because senior executives engaging in secret affairs with direct reports violates fundamental workplace ethics. Friends didn't abandon them because I demanded loyalty. Most simply couldn't reconcile continuing close relationships with people who had demonstrated such capacity for deception. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that surviving betrayal doesn't require becoming bitter or cynical. For several months after discovering the affair, I questioned everyone's motives and sincerity. I searched for hidden agendas in casual conversations and suspected deception lurking behind every interaction. It was no way to live. Gradually, I've reclaimed my capacity for trust. Not blind trust, but the informed, boundaried trust that makes meaningful connections possible. That I recently had dinner with my parents, who had supported me without judgment. Throughout the divorce, my father, typically reserved about personal matters, surprisingly offered this observation. "What happened to you was terrible, son, but I'm prouder of the man you've become through it than I would have been if your marriage had continued in that false state." True character isn't revealed when everything's going well. That perspective resonates with me. The painful dissolution of my marriage revealed aspects of my character I hadn't known existed: strength, dignity, strategic thinking under emotional duress, and the capacity for rebuilding without bitterness. These qualities have served me well in creating this new chapter of my life. Sarah's betrayal could have defined me as a victim. Instead, by focusing on accountability rather than vengeance, I define myself as someone who faces painful truths and responds with integrity. That distinction has made all the difference in my recovery and growth. My life today isn't what I had planned during those early years of marriage, but in many ways, it's richer, more authentic, and built on a stronger foundation. The friends who surround me now have seen me at my worst and chosen to remain. The career I've built has been tested by personal crisis and proven resilient. The new relationship I'm cautiously nurturing is based on honest communication and mutual respect rather than idealized projections. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Sarah had never started that affair, if we had continued in what I thought was a happy marriage. Would I have ever discovered her capacity for deception? Would I have spent decades with someone capable of such betrayal? The thought is actually more disturbing than the painful reality I experienced. The truth, however difficult, allowed me to make informed choices about my life rather than living in a comfortable illusion. And ultimately, that's the most valuable outcome of this entire ordeal. The gift of authenticity, painful as its delivery may have been. Last weekend, Melissa and I hiked to Cannon Beach. the same spot where I had proposed to Sarah years ago. Standing there with the Pacific waves crashing against iconic Haystack Rock, I realized I felt no pain or regret about that earlier memory. It had been absorbed into my history without continuing to wound me. When Melissa took my hand and pointed out a bald eagle soaring overhead, I was fully present in that moment with her, unburdened by the ghosts of my past. That's the real victory in all of this. Not the favorable divorce settlement or the professional advancement, but the freedom to live authentically in the present while carrying the lessons of the past rather than its pain. Sarah and Michael's affair temporarily shattered my life, but in reassembling the pieces, I've created something stronger, more deliberate, and ultimately more fulfilling than what existed before. If there's a message I could share with others facing similar betrayal, it would be this. The initial shock and pain will feel unbearable, but how you respond in those early days will shape everything that follows. Choose dignity over drama, strategic thinking over emotional reaction, and accountability over revenge. Document everything, protect yourself legally and financially, and let natural consequences unfold rather than manufacturing additional pain. Most importantly, remember that surviving betrayal is not just about ending something toxic. It's about creating space for something authentic and healthy to begin. The end of my marriage became the beginning of a more genuine life, one where relationships are based on truth rather than convenience or illusion. Today, as I look toward the future, I do so with hard-earned wisdom rather than naivete, with appropriate caution rather than paralyzing fear, and with the confidence that comes from having survived what once seemed unsurvivable. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I face them as someone who has been tested and not found wanting, someone who chose integrity when it would have been easier to choose vengeance, and dignity when it would have been simpler to choose despair. Sarah's betrayal will always be part of my story, but it's no longer the defining chapter. It's simply the difficult transition that led to where I am now, stronger, wiser, and genuinely grateful for the authentic life I've built from the ruins of what I once had. It's been 5 years total since the day my life changed forever, and looking back, I can now see the discovery of Sarah's affair as a painful but necessary awakening. Had it never happened, I might still be living in blissful ignorance with someone capable of profound deception, a thought that now disturbs me. More than the pain of the betrayal itself, the home I kept in the divorce has become truly mine in every sense. Last year, I finally repainted the living room, replacing the cream color Sarah had insisted upon with a warm sage green that better reflects my taste. The garden that was once her domain has been transformed into a low-maintenance landscape of native plants that attract hummingbirds and butterflies. These changes, while seemingly small, represent the larger reclamation of my space and identity. Professionally, my career continues to flourish. The leadership skills I developed during the crisis, particularly the ability to remain strategic under extreme pressure, have served me well as CTO. Our company recently acquired a smaller competitor, and I led the technical integration that many thought impossible to accomplish without service disruptions. My team has doubled in size, and I find genuine satisfaction in mentoring younger developers, especially those navigating personal challenges while maintaining professional responsibilities. My relationship with Melissa has deepened into something I never thought possible after the trauma of my marriage. Her straightforward nature and emotional intelligence create a partnership built on mutual respect rather than dependency or illusion. 6 months ago, I asked her to move in with me, a step we both approached thoughtfully, with open discussions about expectations, boundaries, and future plans. The home that once felt haunted by betrayal is now filled with new memories and authentic connection. As for Sarah, our paths crossed unexpectedly last year when she returned to Portland for her father's funeral. I attended the service out of respect for her parents, who had always been kind to me. Sarah looked older, the confidence that once defined her presence notably diminished. We exchanged brief, civil words in the receiving line, her thanking me for coming, me offering sincere condolences about her father, who had always treated me like a son. Later, her mother pulled me aside to tell me that Sarah had never truly recovered professionally or personally from the consequences of her actions. After several unfulfilling positions and failed relationships, She had recently moved back to her hometown in the Midwest, taking a teaching position at a community college, a significant step down from her former executive track. According to her mother, Sarah often expressed regret not just for the affair, but for the person she had allowed herself to become during those months of deception. Michael Donovan's story took an even darker turn. After struggling to maintain steady employment in marketing, he attempted to rebrand himself as a freelance consultant. When that failed to gain traction, he moved into sales, eventually relocating to Florida for a position selling timeshares. His relationship with his daughters deteriorated to the point that his older daughter refused to invite him to her high school graduation. Amy, now remarried to a pediatrician colleague, told me that Michael often blames everyone but himself for his downfall, the company, his ex-wife, even Sarah, never fully acknowledging the role his own choices played in the collapse of his life. The contrast between their trajectories and mine isn't something I take pleasure in, but it does reinforce the importance of how one responds to crisis. Sarah and Michael chose deception, then denial, and finally deflection of responsibility. I chose documentation, dignified accountability, and determined rebuilding. The different outcomes weren't random, but directly connected to these fundamental choices. Last month, Melissa and I took a weekend trip to Cannon Beach, what has now become our special place rather than a painful reminder. Walking along the shore at sunset, she asked what I thought my life would be like if I had never discovered Sarah's betrayal. After considering her question carefully, I responded that while I would have been spared immense pain, I would have missed equally immense growth. The man I was before wouldn't have been capable of the relationship we have now, I told her. He trusted blindly rather than thoughtfully, avoided difficult conversations rather than engaging authentically, and defined himself through others' perceptions rather than internal values. She squeezed my hand and said, "Well, I'm grateful for the man you've become, even if I hate how much pain brought you here." That night, watching the Pacific waves under moonlight, I reflected on the strange alchemy that transforms devastating betrayal into profound personal evolution. The process is neither quick nor easy. It requires facing painful truths, making difficult choices, and rebuilding with intention rather than reaction. But the result is a life more authentic and ultimately more fulfilling than what existed before, that I no longer think of myself as someone who survived betrayal. That chapter, while significant, doesn't define my story anymore. I'm simply a man who learned through difficult experience the value of truth, the importance of consequence, and the possibility of building something genuine from the ruins of what once seemed essential. That Sarah's affair destroyed a marriage built on partial truths and comfortable illusions. From that destruction emerged the possibility of a life built on something stronger. Uncompromising honesty, clear boundaries, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can survive what once seemed unsurvivable. That knowledge isn't something I would have chosen to acquire through such painful means. But having gained it, I wouldn't trade the authentic life I've built for the comfortable illusion I once had. Some truths, however devastating their delivery, ultimately set us free. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.